Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. A teacher in France says she fears for her life after showing a 17th century Renaissance painting to her pupils during the class. It was a painting of Diana and Actaeon. It depicts nude women, and complaints were made by some Muslim parents. Meanwhile, staff members went on strike on Monday in solidarity with the teacher involved. The incident occurred in the same week that 6 teenagers were convicted for their role in the 2020 killing of teacher Samuel Paty, who they identified to a radicalised Islamist. So joining me to discuss this, the human rights activist and businessman Shaquille Afsar and the artist and author Alexander Adams. Welcome both to the show. Shaquille, I want to come to you first. A lot of people are concerned because they would say that in an art class in a school, you would have to show works of art that will feature nudity. That is, it's a kind of inevitable aspect of Western artistic culture. Do you take that view, or do you think the teacher should have been more mindful of some of the sensibilities of the pupils in the class?
Well, absolutely. I think with the current situation that's happening in France and the fact that Muslims are being vilified and discriminated by the government, I think that the school should have had a bit more sensitivity in pushing this forward. The simple fact that we see this happening in the United Kingdom with the extreme LGBT indoctrination that's being forced on our children by individual teachers. Unfortunately, the personal beliefs, the personal values, and the personal stance of a teacher is not what our children should be privy to. Our children should be privy to information that shows them about the great society they live in without infringing on their morals, values, and most importantly, religious convictions.
Do you accept the point that when you're learning about art, when learning about Western art in particular, that some of the most important and significant artworks do feature nudity? If you take the Sistine Chapel, for instance, Michelangelo's David, I mean, surely children ought to be introduced to great art when the opportunity arises.
Yeah, well, look, they should be introduced to everything that represents the great societies that we live in. But what we must remember, if parents have concerns in regards to age appropriateness, and we must remember that this is not only a Muslim issue, this is actually an Abrahamic faith issue. This is surrounding people who hold their religion very close to their heart, whether they be Christians, Jews, or Muslims. You know, we should educate our children. We should, teach them about the vibrant societies that we have. But like I said before, we must not infringe on the parents' concerns and the fact that, the parents' right for age appropriateness. The children should be learning about everything in a way that is not upsetting the main stakeholders in any school, which is the parents and the students.
Alexander Adams, do you take Shaquille's point that actually just nude paintings, even if it is a great work of art from the 17th century, that is age inappropriate? Do you think that's right?
Not quite. I think that nudity in itself isn't so much of a problem. I think sexualized nudity, so there are certain classical works of art that are paintings or particularly Greek vases, which are actually extremely sexually explicit, and I would say that these are perhaps not appropriate. But I think that paintings of myths or biblical scenes which include aspects of nudity, such as you can see on the screen at the moment, they are not sexually explicit, so I think that they should be included. I think that children of all faiths need to be exposed to this kind of art because it helps to explain the situation they're in, because they will go out into their cities and they will see these sculptures out in public forums, they will see them on public buildings, they will see them on fountains, and for example. So they really need to know what these depict and what they mean. They may decide that they are sinful and they may decide that they reject it and they dislike these things, but they need to be educated about them first, and then they can make their decision according to their own personal beliefs, logic, or just their cultural beliefs, their religion.
So, Shaquille, do you accept this point that, when it comes to the causing of offence, which is, I think, partly what you're talking about, that sometimes we can't possibly make provisions of that kind? For instance, some pupils may have religious beliefs that find the theory of evolution offensive, but does that mean that we ought not to teach the theory of evolution in science classes in schools?
No, I kind of concur with what your other guest is saying, but what my point is that if parents have issues in regards to age appropriateness, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be taught, but it should be taught in a stage where parents feel that their children are at an age to understand what they're being seen. a lot of the time that what we must understand, people from Abrahamic faith religions, the Jewish community, the Christian community, and the Muslim community have a conversation about sexuality with their children at a very later stage than other communities. And this is something that we must respect. The fact that we live in a society where we should be catering for all people, and we've seen this happen before. The teacher might have felt that she was doing nothing wrong or he was doing nothing wrong. But we've had the same issue with the rampant LGBT indoctrination, where teachers felt that on the guise of equality, it was okay to teach children that a boy can become a girl can become a boy. So it's all for me in regards to, it's about age appropriateness and, most importantly, parental concerns. If parents have concerns, those concerns shouldn't be likened with extremist terrorist attacks that have took previously. Parents have a right to speak without, linking them to incidents that have happened in the past. Unfortunately, it then leaves the parents to be open to be, discriminated, under no basis whatsoever.
I suppose, Alexander, is there a distinction to be drawn here between what Shaquille is describing, which is in the indoctrination of students into belief systems that their families may not hold, such as the idea that human beings can change sex, which is obviously a belief system, and what it means, what art is all about? I mean, art is not about the propaganda of belief systems. Art is something completely different. Isn't that distinction something that we would be wise to draw?
Yes and no. I mean, I think it's very difficult to divorce politics from art, because you'll find that a lot of art that was made with reference to supposedly classical myths or portraits are, for example, commissioned by very powerful people to display their wealth and to say that, our dynasty is the correct dynasty to rule this particular country and so forth. So there is an element of politics in all art. But I agree that art can be appreciated largely without politics, but you do need that informed information. You do need to be led into this by an educator, and that it's absolutely, and it bleeds out into all areas. So, for example, Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, which is the drawing of the man with his arms and legs outspread. This is an example of not only of the Renaissance art, but of humanism, of the beginning of the scientific method and so forth. And it's a key image in the history of Western culture. So it needs to be shown. But obviously, yes, but it's obviously a nude figure. I think the problem is that once you start taking into account the Abrahamic faiths, which obviously I'm sort of very sympathetic towards, you come up against something which is that there is a prescription against graven images in all the three religions. So it says that you must not depict anything at all. So if you went with the most conservative approach from Jews, Muslims and Christians, then you would not have any art taught or displayed in schools at all, which I think would be a problem.
I think this would be very difficult. Shaquille, can I just ask you about that? Because I think as a teacher, I would struggle to anticipate that the kind of image that we're talking about, that 17th century painting of Diana and Actaeon, I see that picture and I would never anticipate that would cause offence, because as Alexander says, it's not a sexualised image. So what would your view be? Would it be that teachers ought to be hyper cautious, that if there's any nudity whatsoever, they should run that past the parents first? I mean, how would this work on a practical basis?
Well, on a practical basis, they could simply, if they can identify that they have a class full of Abrahamic faith students, they can be, mindful to the religious concerns that those students have. You can show an image without actually showing certain parts of that image that they might find offensive. So there are ways to depict art, and there are ways to show the children the vibrant art that exists in our society without actually offending them. If a group of people are feeling offended and are feeling that their religious beliefs are not being adhered to by them looking at a specific picture, surely as a society, as an open marketplace of views, we would cater for these people, because what they are only asking is the fact that it is against their religion. And I understand that the teachers are only asking that they want to show this vibrant art, and surely we can meet somewhere in the midpoint. It shouldn't just be you have to see this and that is only it. Surely in a society and as, humans, we can learn to live and coexist with one another and appreciate and understand each other's concerns.
Does it trouble you at all, Shaquille, that so often in these cases it escalates into these big arguments where there are threats and people feel that their lives are endangered? And we saw this in the Batley Grammar School, of course, event, and that teacher is still in hiding as a result of complaints from religious groups. Does it concern you that we end up in that kind of situation where people think that there's a possible threat of violence?
Yeah, well, absolutely. That is very concerning. You know, any sort of disheartened in our community, any sort of divide in our community is never a good thing. But what you must understand is Muslims, Christians, and Jews, unfortunately, across the globe are being persecuted, and they're being persecuted in schools under the guise of equality. So you can only understand when a certain situation comes up, and this has been happening for the last couple of years, especially in the United Kingdom. There was a major uproar in 2019 where I was actually taken into the High Court because I asked my nephew's head teacher why she was giving my nephew a book that would suggest a transgender lifestyle as being acceptable without consulting his parent. So the point is, I understand that, you know, both sides of the argument, but what we must understand and what we must grasp is these are people who hold their religious beliefs very close to their heart. These are people who are understanding, and I understand and condemn any form of extremism. You know, we must not get on to the most extreme side of things. We must be, you know, a peace-loving community, a peace-loving nation, but a community who's being continuously vilified. You know, the Abrahamic faiths are continuously being battered and, you know, targeted. You can only understand for the heightened issues that are happening. But again, they should be pushing their concerns in a respectful, peace-loving manner.
Is the problem, Alexander, to come to you on this, is the problem that it is being interpreted as an attack on faith? I mean, I have absolutely no doubt that an art teacher showing an image like that is not at all attempting to attack anyone's religious belief, but that people are taking it that way. Is that really the problem here?
Well, I mean, you could say that they're educating people about the classical religion of Greece. Also, a lot of Western art, of course, is to do with the Bible. It comes from the Bible, and a lot of it is sort of to do with matters from the Old Testament. So these would be familiar for Muslim students as well. But I think that there is an assault on religion, and there is a great deal of hostility towards all of the Abrahamic faiths. So I'm kind of sympathetic. I do understand why Muslims feel that their concerns are not taken as seriously, because this is also
the art teacher was attempting to attack anyone's faith by showing this image.
No, I don't think that the teacher was doing that at all. They were simply talking about art, and they were presenting a good example of classical mythological painting, which is the sort of thing that children in France would see. In sort of civic buildings, they would see, you know, like Liberty Leading the People, which is a painting by Delacroix, is a painting of a woman showing her breasts, and she's leading the revolutionaries across the barricade in 1848. And this is a national symbol. So this is a symbol of France, a woman with her breasts bared. Now, obviously, this is a little bit difficult for Muslims and conservative Christians to take. But you need to understand what this means and why it's so important to the French people, even if ultimately you think it's inappropriate or wrong.
Very interesting. I'm afraid we're out of time, but thank you both ever so much for joining me, Shaquille and Alexander. Thank you.